Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thanks everyone for joining. Please ask questions in our live chat and I'll answer them right now. So please like this video and subscribe for more videos like this. We've got another webinar coming up next week, which is a clients only webinar. So if you are a client, you can see we've got a section of client only webinars on the YouTube page, and you can click the link in the description to subscribe. So let's get started. So today's webinar, we're going to be going over tenancy in common, which is a way of investing your solo 401k funds in real estate. So previously we talked about using a solo 401k to invest via an LLC. Today's discussion is going to be going over how to invest via a tenancy in common. So let's talk about that. So under the tenants in common arrangement, you have multiple owners or investors in a single property. So one investor is going to be the solo 401k. Another investor may be, it could be you, or it could be an unrelated person. And we're going to go over different scenarios. So again, please feel free to ask questions. Thanks. I see some other people joining. Thanks for joining. And just again, a reminder of the schedule before we dive in a little bit deeper. Next week, we've got a client-only webinar, and then we're going to have another webinar for everybody. It's that next week's webinar is going to be going over mega backdoor Roth contributions, which is a hot topic. But back to the tenancy in common. So, and that's a big distinction. So one scenario is the 401k and you, or say a related person. Another scenario is the 401k and an unrelated person. So certain rules are going to apply in each scenario. So first things first, you want to set up a solo 401k, which is going to allow you to invest in real estate or other alternative investments. So that's going to entail getting, say, a bank account set up or a brokerage account. A lot of folks who want to invest in real estate do like the bank account because you can ACH money out of the account very easily. You can get access to a debit card. You get a checkbook. The brokerage, there's a number of good brokerage account options out there, which do give checkbooks, say like a Fidelity or Schwab. But you're not going to be able to get like a certified bank check. You're not going to get a debit card, those types of things. Of course, you can have both. So, but that would be the first step, is getting that, account open, getting it funded. You're going to be funding it with either by rolling over money from a pre-existing account, say like a former employer plan, or maybe a non-Roth IRA. Once the money's in that account, then you can start investing. So step 3 here is determining other tenancy in common investors, other tenants. So one is going to be the 401k. So you might have the name of your plan as, let's say, XYZ Investment Trust. That's not very creative, but you can be as creative as you want to be. And then the other investor could be you. So let's talk about that path. So in that situation, you're actually going to have multiple parties listed on the title. One is going to be the solo 401k trust, and the other is going to be you personally. So it could be, John Smith personally, and then the JS Investment Trust. So when you are using your retirement money together with your non-retirement money to invest in real estate, that's called a tenancy in common. In that situation, it's got to be an all cash purchase. So you're not going to be able to use financing. You're not going to be able to use non-recourse debt or a mortgage to buy that property. So it's got to be an all cash purchase. It's got to be a simultaneous purchase. Some people will say, well, I really want to act in this investment opportunity. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and buy the property myself, and then I'll get my solo 401k set up over. I'll, I'll, and then I'll, buy the other part of it with my 401k funds. That doesn't work. It's got to be a simultaneous purchase. If you take that staged approach where you first buy it and then at that point you can't sell it to your 401k. That's a prohibited transaction. So you can't, or if it's another unrelated person, you can't purchase property from yourself or other disqualified persons. Another important point is that you need to be able to demonstrate that you could have done this transaction without having to use the solo 401k funds. So, and to put this in context, a lot of this guidance is coming from, or at least is summarized in a DOL opinion letter out there called, it's a DOL opinion letter 2000-10A. So, and that's a great resource. I mean, of course, you have to contend with other things that you would always do when you're investing in real estate using your solo 401k funds. I mean, you're not going to be able to collect a fee personally for this investment. So in other words, you're not going to be able to personally benefit based on using your things that always apply. So let's shift over now and let's talk about a tenancy in common arrangement where you have a third party investor. So one big difference here is that you can actually use debt financing. Now, it does need to be non-recourse with respect to the solo 401k. So just like if you were just making a straight 100% solo 401k funded purchase of real estate using debt, where there's no other tenant, it has to be non-recourse financing. So that's still going to apply. Again, you can't purchase property from yourself or another related person. So you can't say, well, I'm going to take my 401k funds. Let's say that you've got, investment property that you own personally, and you've got, say, a buyer out there, and the buyer, let's say it was two buyers that were going to buy the property, and one buyer drops off. You can't say, well, I'll have my 401k fill in for the other buyer. No, that won't work. So the transaction with the other unrelated person can't be to buy property from yourself. And just to reiterate here, there's a good note about if you're going to be using debt financing, the third party investor cannot be a disqualified person. So if a disqualified person's involved, that's going to be people up and down the family tree, your parents, your grandparents, your children. It's also your spouse, your son-in-law or daughter-in-law. Then you got to analyze it as if the other investor is you. So now we're back on the other side of the chart. So I see we got some other people joining, which is fantastic. Thanks so much for joining. Please ask questions if anything is not clear, and we can spend time going over it. All right, we'll keep going forward here. So step 4, put the offer or contract together. So let's assume that 40% of the money is coming from your solo 401k funds and 60% of the money is coming from your personal funds. So in that case, the title is going to list both the 401k and you personally. So in this example here, we've got Jane Smith, trustee of Palms Tree Trust, has an undivided 40% interest. Jane Smith, because she put up 60% of the money from her non-retirement money, has a 60% interest. So both are listed on the title. With the third party scenario, it's similar. Let's say in this scenario, 70% of the money is coming from Jane Smith's solo 401k, and then 30% of the money is coming from an unrelated person. In that case, the title is going to show that, Jane has 70. Might be having some technical difficulties here. So I'm going to just repeat that because I think we might have had some technical difficulties. Again, if it's a third-party investor, it's very similar in both scenarios. You have to have both the trust and the other person, whether it's you or the other unrelated person, listed on the title, and it's going to show the respective percentage of interest in that property. So we've got some more folks joining. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Please ask questions if these things are not clear. Okay, let's keep going here. So now we're going to talk about making the deposit. So one thing that is important to understand is that when you are investing your 401k funds via tenancy and common, all the income and expenses needs to come from the tenants, from the owners, in accordance with those ownership percentages. And those ownership percentages are based on how much money each person or each tenant is investing. So that's going to go down to the transaction level. So when you're making that earnest deposit, if it's, say, you and your 401k, like in this scenario here on the slide, 40% from the 401k and 60% from you. So 40% of the earnest deposit comes from the solo 401k and 60% comes from you. Works the same when it's a third party. Let's say it's 70% from the 401k and 30% from the third party investor. So you have to really be observant of those ownership percentages and ensuring that the funds are coming in proportion to those ownership percentages. Okay, step 6, funding and closing. So again, it's going to be just like the earnest deposit. If it's a 40-60 split, you and the 401k, then 40% of the money is going to come from the 401k at closing, 60% from you. If it's 70-30 with the 401k and the third party investor, 70% comes from the solo 401k and 30% comes from the third party investor. So you have to be very strict about ensuring that the transactions are in proportion to those ownership percentages. Okay. Let's stop and see if anyone has any questions. Please don't hesitate to fire them off in the live chat. We've come here to the last slide here. So let's talk about some of the good practical points here. In terms of paying expenses, those expenses need to be paid in accordance with the ownership percentages. So that, practically speaking, that means you got to make sure you're budgeting accordingly, right? And likewise, if money's coming in, right? Let's say it's a rental property. Well, the rental income needs to be allocated, again, in accordance with the ownership percentages. So maybe what you have is you have the property manager that's collecting the rent from the tenants, and it then is paying expenses. When the property management company is making distributions, it's going to have to make distributions in accordance with those ownership percentages, after netting for expenses. And obviously that property manager, that's not going to be you, because you're not going to be making fees or money off of this investment. It's a passive investment. So you need to plan ahead, make sure that the solo 401k has enough funds to cover its expenses based on those ownership percentages. If you invest all your solo 401k money in this investment, you may be in a bind when it comes time to come up with expenses if there's not enough rental income, say, coming in to cover expenses. So the next point here that I want to make is that you still have to observe all the rules that apply to investing in real estate with solo 401k funds. So that means you're not going to be able to use the property for personal use. So a good question we sometimes get is, like, say somebody wants to use, some of their personal money, some of their non-retirement money to make an investment. Let's say it's a vacation rental. And they say, well, I own part of this property personally because I bought it as a tenancy in common. Can I use, at least for part of the year, the property for myself? Use it as a vacation spot? The answer is no. So if your solo 401k owns any part of that property, it's going to be just like your 401k owns the whole thing. You can't use it for personal use. You can't work on the property. You have to observe all those same rules. And then lastly here, sometimes we'll see situations where people will ask, well, can I buy or sell my solo 401k interest to myself? Can I buy out my 401k interest, right? Or could I sell it to, my dad or something like that? The answer is no. So again, it goes back to the same concept. You got to observe the rules. The rules still apply. So if you own a property inside your solo 401k 100%, you can't sell that property to yourself. You can't sell it to your father. Those are disqualified persons. So if you own an ownership interest in a property because you bought it as a tenancy in common, the ownership interest that you hold inside your solo 401k, you can't sell it to yourself. You can't sell it to your father. So those rules still apply. So we'll stop and see if anyone has any more questions or has any questions. Please fire them off in the live chat. We really appreciate everyone spending the time to join. Again, please like this video or subscribe and subscribe for more videos like this. Next week, we're going to be going over Mega Backdoor Roth, so please look out for that. We're also going to be having a client-only webinar next week, so please register for that in the link in the description. So thank everyone for joining, and take care. Bye-bye.